She was just a secretary until the CEO's daughter found a photo in her wallet and asked, "Why is my dad in this?" Ivy froze. The question had come from a 6-year-old girl in a pink dress, holding a crumpled photo she'd found in Ivy's wallet, a photo no one was ever supposed to see. In a second, 10 years of silence, shame, and buried love came crashing back like a wave. She was just the secretary, quiet, invisible. But now everyone would know the secret she kept hidden in her heart and in her drawer. Because sometimes it only takes one innocent question to unlock everything, and sometimes the photo you hide is the one that finally tells the truth. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The marble floors of Quinn International gleamed beneath Ivy Caldwell's heels as she walked down the main corridor. 2 coffees in hand, one for herself, black no sugar, and one for Marla at reception, always with oat milk and cinnamon. "Thank you, Ivy. You always remember," Marla said, blinking up from her screen with tired eyes. "I remember the people who say, 'Good morning,'" Ivy replied softly, her voice warm but distant. That was Ivy, gentle, efficient, always kind, but always just out of reach. She was the secretary. Nothing more, nothing less. But today, something was different. The executive elevator, the one that never stopped on the 22nd floor, had been stuck for nearly 5 minutes. The marble lobby was filled with hushed tones and darting glances. Ivy's soft curls bounced as she slowed her pace. She recognized the pattern, unspoken tension, like static in the air before a storm. To balance the coffees, Ivy set her purse on the console by the boardroom doors. And then came the unmistakable sound of childlike giggles echoing down the corridor. "That's odd," Ivy thought, stopping near the large glass doors of the boardroom. Children were rare here. This was a place of crisp suits, stiff pleasantries, and emails sent at midnight. Suddenly, the doors swung open. A little girl in a pale pink dress skipped out, a doll tucked under one arm, and in her other hand, a small creased photograph. "I found this in her wallet, right there in her bag," the girl called out, holding it up for all to see, her voice high and bright. Ivy's heart stopped. The girl, no more than 6, walked straight toward her, curls bouncing, blue eyes wide with curiosity. "Why is my dad in this photo?" she asked, holding up the picture like it was a treasure. "Were you friends?" The photo was old, slightly faded, but unmistakable. Damian Quinn, years younger, with no suit, no tie, just a soft sweater and a sleepy smile. One arm around a woman with copper-brown hair and eyes that looked just like Ivy's, her younger self. Gasps whispered around the hallway. Several eyes flicked to the console by the boardroom doors where Ivy's purse still sat. Ivy didn't move. The girl looked up, confused by the silence. "Isn't he your boss?" There was a pause, an unbearable, hanging pause, before a cold, clipped voice broke it. "Sienna," came the unmistakable tone of Damian Quinn himself, now stepping into view. The crowd parted like a tide. He stood tall, his navy suit jacket unbuttoned, shirt slightly wrinkled at the collar, out of place for the famously composed CEO. But it was his eyes that betrayed him, steel blue, flickering with something between disbelief and recognition. His gaze locked on Ivy. She swallowed hard, every muscle still. Sienna turned to her father. "Daddy," she had this picture in her wallet. "Look." He took it slowly, carefully. Ivy watched as his fingers, those same fingers that once brushed a lock of hair from her cheek, touched the edge of the photo. He didn't deny it, didn't explain, didn't say a word. "Ivy," he murmured, almost too quietly. The hallway held its breath. She could have denied it, could have made a joke, laughed it off, claimed it was someone else, but something deep inside, something she had buried a long time ago, rose to the surface. Dignity, The kind that comes not from pride, but from surviving heartbreak and still choosing grace. She met his eyes, chin slightly lifted. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "We knew each other. A long time ago." The silence cracked. Phones were lifted. Photos snapped. Murmurs flared. "Let's go," Damien said sharply, taking Sienna's hand. But the child, still clinging to curiosity, resisted. "Wait, did she love you?" "Sienna," he warned, his voice tight. Ivy didn't flinch. She crouched gently, eye to eye with the girl. "That's a big question," she said softly, "and sometimes the answer is complicated." Sienna blinked, trying to make sense of it. Then Ivy smiled, just enough to warm the moment. "But I like your dress. The lace is very special." Sienna beamed. Damien stood motionless, the photo still in his hand. And then he tucked it into his coat pocket. Without a word, he took Sienna and walked away. Ivy stood slowly, brushing her skirt as whispers flurried like leaves in wind. She was just the secretary. Did you see his face? They knew each other? But Ivy turned, walked to her desk, and sat with the poise of a woman who had survived worse storms in silence. And under the soft clack of keys, she felt something tremble inside her. A memory? A question long buried. Why had she kept that photo? That afternoon, Ivy didn't go to the staff cafe. She sat in the small garden balcony outside the east wing, alone with her lukewarm tea and half a biscotti. The metal table wobbled slightly. She adjusted her seat. The wind rustled her coppery hair. And then, "Mind if I join you?" She looked up. Marla, holding 2 lemon poppy seed muffins. "I thought you might skip lunch," the receptionist said, placing one gently on the table. "But everyone deserves something sweet after being ambushed by a 6-year-old and company gossip in the same breath." Ivy let out the faintest laugh. "The kind that escapes before you can stop it." "Thanks, Marla." They sat together in silence, the city humming below. A brief, tender moment in a day that felt like unraveling thread. "I remember when you started," Marla said suddenly. "You had a nervous smile, and that same silver leaf necklace?" Ivy touched it unconsciously. "It was a gift," she said, "from someone I used to know." Marla didn't press, but Ivy's thoughts were already spiraling, back to a time before the suit and the boardroom, before she was just the secretary, back when Damien Quinn had been just Damien, and she had been the woman he called Ives. That evening, Ivy opened the drawer of her bedside table, the one she never touched, and there, beneath old receipts and worn bookmarks, was the matching photo, the one he didn't see. Only in this one, they were kissing. Ivy stared at the photo in her hand, the one she never meant to hold again. The colors had dulled with time. But the moment was as vivid as ever, Damien's hand cradling her cheek, her eyes closed, his lips brushing hers, with a kind of reverence that didn't match the man in the boardroom now. Back then, love felt like possibility, not a scandal. She tucked it back into the drawer and stood by the window. Below, the city sparkled. Somewhere in that maze of lights was the version of her who believed a kiss could change the world. But the woman standing here now? She had bills, quiet mornings, and no one waiting for her at the end of the day. The kettle clicked in the kitchen. She poured chamomile tea into her favorite chipped mug and curled up on the sofa. But just as she reached for her book, her phone buzzed. Message from unknown number, "We need to talk." DQ. Her chest tightened. He had her number memorized, even now. The next morning at the office, Ivy did what she always did, kept her head down, did her job, and greeted people by name even when they didn't greet her back. But the air was different, the kind of silent buzz that followed a rumor too juicy to let go. "I heard they were engaged once," whispered a junior exec behind her. "No way," He wouldn't date a secretary. Maybe she was just obsessed with him. She still wears that necklace, you know. Ivy walked past. Spine straight, lips closed. She'd learned long ago that silence was more dignified than defense. Still, the sting was sharp. Inside her small office, tucked behind the HR hallway and invisible to most, she found a white envelope on her desk. No name, just a room number, 27B, 10:15 a.m. Please come. D. The clock read 10:02. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she rose. Room 27B wasn't a conference room. It was one of the private lounges on the executive floor. She hadn't been up there in over 7 years. When she pushed open the door, Damien was standing by the window, no jacket this time. Just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled. That alone felt disarming. He turned when he heard her enter. "Ivy," she gave him a polite nod. "Mr. Quinn." That stung him. She could see it. Good. "I didn't know Sienna had wandered into your floor yesterday," he said. "She was with my sister for a few minutes and slipped away." Ivy crossed her arms. Staying near the door, "Children are curious and honest." He paused, then stepped toward her slowly. "You kept the photo." She didn't answer. "May I ask why?" She looked away. "Because once it meant something, that's all." Damien exhaled, dragging a hand through his dark hair. "I didn't think you still remembered." "I didn't forget," she said. Her voice steady. "I just learned to live without it." That landed between them like a cracked mirror, sharp, silent, impossible to piece back together. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For which part?" she asked, tilting her head. "The silence? The way it ended? Or pretending we were nothing?" That shook him. He stepped closer. Too close. "Ivy? We weren't supposed to be anything, you know that." Her eyes flickered. "No, Damien, you weren't supposed to feel anything. I did, and I paid the price for it." That silence again, thick, full of unsaid years. "I never meant to hurt you," he said softly, "but you did." Her voice cracked. "Just barely. And now your daughter's asking questions, and people in the office are turning their heads, and I'm being reminded how invisible I was, except to you. And even then, only when the doors were closed." Damien stepped back, ashamed. There it was, her dignity, fully present, standing taller than any boardroom table. He nodded slowly. "Would you have lunch with me?" She blinked. "Lunch? Just to talk. In public. Not in secret this time." That made her pause. "Are you trying to fix something?" she asked. "I'm trying," he said, to not be a coward again. They met in a small Italian cafe 2 blocks from the office. A place with mismatched chairs, lemon water on every table, and opera music playing softly in the background. Ivy hadn't been here in years, though it used to be their place. Damien held the door. She stepped in without looking at him. They ordered, modestly, soup and bread for her, ravioli and coffee for him. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled as she poured the water. "Haven't seen you two here in a while. Same table?" Damien flushed. Ivy gave a gentle nod. "Yes, thank you." They sat by the window, a bowl of lentil soup steaming between them. For a while they ate in silence. Then Ivy said, "You got married?" He looked at his hands. "Briefly. Divorced 2 years later. Sienna was just a baby." "I didn't know." "No one did." She sipped her tea. "And you?" he asked. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "I had too many ghosts sitting at the table." That made him smile too, not from amusement, but understanding. "I never stopped wondering what would have happened if I'd fought for us," he said quietly. "But you didn't," she said, "and I learned to stop waiting." Then something unexpected, a laugh, small, surprised. He tilted his head. "What?" she smirked. "You still eat ravioli like a 10-year-old. Messily? Like it might run away." They both laughed. It didn't solve anything, but it softened the air. As they stood to leave, Ivy reached for her purse, and the old silver leaf pendant caught on the button of her coat. Damien gently untangled it for her, his fingers brushing hers. But just as he stepped back, a camera shutter clicked behind them. Someone had taken a photo, and whoever it was, ran. The photo was online before Ivy even got back to her desk. Someone had zoomed in just enough to capture the pendant in Damien's hand, his fingers brushing hers. The caption, posted anonymously to the company's internal social board, read, "Is this why Mr. Quinn protects the secretary? Looks very cozy for a lunch break." By 3 p.m. it had been viewed 1,200 times. By 3:05, HR had called her in. "Ivy, we just need to ask a few questions," said Terrence, the compliance officer, who looked more nervous than she did. He was mid-40s, always wore striped socks, and had the unfortunate habit of stammering when something uncomfortable came up. She sat across from him in a room that smelled faintly of coffee and plastic folders. "We understand this may be invasive," he began, "but the board is requesting clarity on whether there's any personal involvement between you and Mr. Quinn, past or present, that could impact professional operations or perceptions of favoritism." Ivy said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Our male executives also asked to explain old photographs and who they once kissed." Terrence blinked. I mean, in some cases, if it involves someone on payroll. I haven't had a promotion in 7 years," Ivy said. "I haven't taken a single day of medical leave, have never been late, and still make less than most of the men with half my hours." Terrence flushed. "Understood. I'm required to document that you've denied any ongoing relationship." She looked him straight in the eye. "I deny having any improper relationship with Mr. Quinn." He nodded quickly, grateful to move on. "Thank you. That's all." That evening, Ivy walked through the grocery store with her usual basket of essentials: green tea, lentils, oat milk, and a box of cereal on sale. She moved carefully, her heels swapped for worn flats, her hair pulled back. In public, she looked like any other quiet woman with a shopping list and a long day behind her. She stopped by the produce section, picking out tomatoes, when she heard a soft voice behind her. "Ms. Caldwell?" She turned. It was her. The woman from HR. Not Terrence. The other one, younger, sharper. Tasha. Wearing jeans and sneakers now, but still with that ever-tilted head of a person who measured every word. "I just wanted to say, what happened to you today wasn't fair." Ivy blinked. That she hadn't expected. Tasha went on. "I've worked in 2 other companies. I've seen this play out. The man's story stays clean. The woman's reputation turns to ash." Ivy offered a tired smile. "Well, I've survived worse." Tasha hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Depends on the question." Tasha lowered her voice. "Were you in love with him?" The grocery store lights hummed overhead. Ivy turned back to the tomatoes, selecting one with a gentle press. "Let's just say he made me feel seen for a little while, and then unseen for a very long time." Tasha nodded, visibly absorbing that. "That's a better answer than I deserve." Then she took a deep breath, reached into her bag and handed Ivy something folded. "I think you should see this." It was a printout. Black and white, a company calendar. Friday, 11 a.m. Board review, conduct an executive integrity topic, internal romantic conflicts, confidential. "No one told you," Tasha said quietly, "but they plan to vote on whether you should be reassigned or let go." At home that night, Ivy made mushroom risotto for one. Not because she was hungry, but because the stirring gave her hands something to do. The apartment was quiet, save for the sound of the spoon against the pan and the soft hum of her record player playing Norah Jones in the background. She set the table anyway, poured a glass of water, sat with her back straight, as if a guest might still arrive. Across from her, an empty chair. She lifted her fork, then paused, and said out loud, "You never really said goodbye, did you?" The silence didn't answer, but the risotto, warm and rich, filled more than just her stomach. It reminded her she could still take care of herself. She always had. Friday, 10:58 a.m. The boardroom was full. Glass walls, 9 members, 1 woman standing alone on the other side of the table. "Ivy Caldwell," announced a tall man in a gray pinstripe suit. "We understand you were previously acquainted with Mr. Quinn and that recent events have raised questions of perception." "I'd like to speak," came another voice. Everyone turned. Damian Quinn entered, calm, controlled, but his tie was slightly loosened, just enough to show he hadn't slept much. "With respect," he said, "this meeting should be about my conduct, not hers." Someone coughed. Another adjusted his glasses. "I made the decision to distance myself years ago. It was cowardice, not professionalism." He looked at Ivy. "I asked her to lunch this week because I owed her a public apology, and whether the photo was leaked or not, I won't let her be punished for my silence." Murmurs. "She's the most competent, loyal, and discreet employee we've ever had. And if she leaves this building, it should be because she chooses to, not because we failed her." Ivy stood frozen. No one spoke. Finally, the woman at the far end, a silver-haired board member in a soft mauve suit, cleared her throat. "I think," she said gently, "we've heard enough." Later that evening, Ivy stepped outside for air. Autumn leaves drifted along the sidewalk. She clutched her coat tight around her. Just then, a car pulled up beside her, the window lowered. Inside, Sienna, grinning with 2 missing front teeth. "Hi again," she chirped. "Guess what? Daddy says you're coming to dinner tomorrow." Ivy blinked. What?" Behind the wheel, Damian leaned across. "If you'll come," she hesitated. Sienna beamed. "Please? I made soup from a box, but still, soup." Ivy stood on the front steps of Damian Quinn's townhouse, arms wrapped around a modest bouquet of eucalyptus and wildflowers. Nothing too romantic. But not cold either. Something honest, sincere. Her coat was buttoned to the top, gloves tucked into her purse, and the pendant around her neck glinted faintly in the porch light. It was a quiet street in an old-money part of town, where doors were tall, windows were wide, and silence was curated like art. She wasn't sure why she'd come. Actually, she was. Sienna, that little voice, bright and disarming. "I made soup, from a box, but still soup." And the look in Damian's eyes when he said, "If you'll come." No pressure, just a hope. But even hope needed manners. She raised her hand to knock and paused. She remembered knocking on his apartment door years ago, nervous, in love, the night before the gala, when he kissed her forehead and said, "You're the best thing that ever wasn't supposed to happen." And then he left. The door swung open. Sienna stood there with a crooked pink headband and a spoon in her hand. "You came," Ivy smiled. "You invited me." Sienna ran forward and threw her arms around Ivy's legs before dashing off down the hallway shouting, "She came! She came!" Ivy stepped inside, the warmth and scent of rosemary filling the entryway. Damian appeared at the end of the hall in jeans and a black sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows. He looked human, not the CEO, not the past, just a man. "Hey," he said simply, voice low. "Hi." For a moment they stood there, awkward and familiar all at once. Then he smiled. "You brought flowers." "I didn't want to come empty-handed." He took them gently. "You never did." Dinner was chaos, but the soft, domestic kind. The table was set with mismatched plates and one candle that kept leaning to the left. Sienna had poured water like it was a science experiment, and there were 4 different types of bread for no clear reason. They ate soup, tomato basil, with alphabet noodles. "It was in a red box," Sienna explained solemnly. "But I stirred it really good, and Daddy made the toast." "Well," Ivy said, smiling at her, "it tastes better than most restaurant meals I've had this year." Sienna beamed. Damien raised his glass of apple juice like a toast. To the chef. To the stirrer, Ivy added. Sienna giggled so hard she dropped a noodle down her dress. No one minded. Later, after Sienna was tucked into bed and the dishes were done, by hand, Ivy noticed, no dishwasher in sight, Damien handed her a cup of tea on the small balcony. I forgot how quiet this part of the city gets at night, she said, wrapping her fingers around the warm mug. Sometimes I still expect to hear taxis and sirens, but up here it's just still. They stood for a moment in that stillness. Leaves rustled. A distant dog barked. Somewhere, someone played jazz on an old record. You didn't have to defend me in the boardroom, she said softly. I did. I could have handled it. I know. She looked at him, brow gently raised. Then why? Because I let you take the fall last time, he said, and I won't do that again. There it was, plain, without ego, without drama, just regret, placed like a card on the table. Ivy looked down into her tea. I thought I meant nothing to you, she admitted. You ended it so quickly. You meant everything. That was the problem. Her breath caught. I was climbing, he said. Every step, every promotion, I was told to keep my record clean. No relationships, no attachments that could be perceived. She looked up. So I was a liability. He flinched. No, you were too good, too decent. And I wasn't brave enough. That silence again. The one that said all the words they hadn't had the courage for. You never even said goodbye, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't, he replied. If I saw you cry, I'd never leave. And I was so sure leaving was the right thing. Was it? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. In the living room, Sienna had left her doll on the couch. Ivy picked it up, carefully fixing the strap on its dress. Damien watched her from the kitchen. She asked if she could call you Miss Ivy, he said. She already does. She also asked if I loved you. Ivy turned slowly. And what did you say? I said I used to, he said. And maybe I still do. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. Is that unfair? He asked. It's unfinished, she replied. And that was worse. As Ivy walked toward the door to leave, she reached for her coat. Damien helped, brushing her shoulder with quiet care. Then he paused. This necklace, he said, fingers resting lightly on the silver leaf pendant. You still wear it? It's not about you, she said softly. It's about who I was when you gave it to me. He let his hand drop. I'd like to meet that version of you again, he said. If you'll let me. Ivy opened the door. I'll let you know, she whispered, and stepped into the night. By Saturday morning, Ivy had already done her laundry, made her tea, and reorganized the spice rack, all in an effort to ignore the unopened envelope sitting by her apartment door. Hand-delivered. No return address, heavy cardstock. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. A formal complaint had been filed. Someone at Quinn International was calling her unprofessional, overfamiliar, and potentially manipulative. The words weren't just cruel, they were calculated, precise enough to sting, vague enough to stick. And Ivy already knew who had written it. Brielle Maddox, Vice President of Communications, of polished, ruthless, impossible not to notice. She'd risen fast in the company over the last 5 years, and ever since Ivy had helped organize her very first executive briefing, Brielle had treated her like a walking coat rack. Silent, stationary, and useful only when needed. Damien had once dated her briefly. Everyone knew it, including Ivy. They'd been seen at a gala 3 winters ago, Brielle in crimson velvet, Damien in classic black tie. It didn't last long, but Brielle had stayed close, to power, to proximity, and especially to Sienna. And now Ivy had crossed a line that Brielle considered hers to guard. Ivy sat on a bench at the city park with her lifelong friend Miriam, who handed her a pastry wrapped in wax paper. You're going to eat this whether you want it or not, Miriam said, pushing it into Ivy's hand. You look like you've been surviving off air and mild panic. It's almond. I know. It's called knowing your best friend. Ivy took a bite. It was warm, flaky, just sweet enough. She closed her eyes for a second longer than usual. Miriam watched her closely. So, are we finally talking about it? Talking about what? That man, Miriam said, voice lowering to a dramatic whisper. That heartbreak of a CEO who walked out of your life like he was late for a meeting and never said sorry until it made headlines. Ivy smiled faintly. You've always had a way with metaphors. You always had a way with secrets. Miriam softened. But I remember the version of you after he left. That silence you wore like a second skin. You stopped baking. You stopped singing. And you never brought up his name. Ivy nodded. Quiet. And now he's back, Miriam continued, saying the right things, offering soup and child-sized forgiveness. That child-sized forgiveness is the only reason I haven't disappeared. I know, Miriam said gently. But you need to decide. Are you opening a door or just leaning on it because you're tired? Ivy didn't answer, because the truth was, she didn't know. Monday came too fast. Ivy walked into the office to find her desk cleared of her usual files and her computer locked. There was a yellow sticky note on the monitor. Pending reassignment, CHR. BM. Her stomach turned. She walked to her inbox and found the internal memo. Due to ongoing concerns regarding professional boundaries, Ms. Caldwell will be temporarily reassigned to the Compliance Division, effective immediately, pending further review. No warning. No meeting, no dignity. Damien's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. Whispers followed her down the hall like smoke. She entered the HR office to find Tasha already waiting. I didn't approve this, Tasha said, handing Ivy a copy of the memo. It came from Brielle's office. She bypassed the process. She can do that? She shouldn't, Tasha replied. But no one's challenging her, not with the board already tense. Ivy exhaled slowly. I don't want special treatment. I just want to be treated fairly. Tasha looked at her with something like admiration. You're the only one here not playing a game. The compliance office was 2 floors down, no windows. No natural light, just gray cubicles and recycled air. Ivy set down her purse and sat in the corner desk beside a humming printer and an old coffee maker that sputtered more than it brewed. She opened her email. No message from Damien. But 10 minutes later, someone knocked softly on the edge of her cubicle. Sienna? Tiny coat, mittens dangling from strings, a clipboard in her hand. I'm your new assistant, she declared. Ivy blinked. Are you? Daddy's in a meeting, but I told him I wanted to help you work. So here I am. She pulled up a second chair and plopped down, her legs swinging. Also, I brought you this. She handed Ivy a folded paper crane. It's not a real bird, but it can still fly, if you believe. Ivy smiled. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How did you learn to make this? Miss Brielle taught me, but she said only some people deserve nice things. Sienna paused. I think she was wrong. Ivy tucked the paper crane next to her monitor. And just like that, something in her heart lifted. Later that day, as she stepped outside for fresh air, Ivy found Brielle waiting by the lobby window, arms crossed, expression like glass. So, you're still here? Ivy met her eyes. Apparently. Brielle stepped closer, voice low. You should have stayed in the past where you belonged. Is that what this is about? Ivy asked. You're afraid of a photograph from 7 years ago? I'm not afraid of you, Brielle said. But I don't like distractions in this company, and I especially don't like women who use a child to claw their way back into relevance. That made Ivy go still. Careful, Brielle, she said, voice calm but sharp. You're mistaking dignity for weakness. I'm protecting the company, Brielle snapped. No, Ivy replied. You're protecting yourself from a version of the story you can't control. Brielle opened her mouth but didn't speak. Ivy stepped past her. She didn't look back. That evening, as Ivy entered her apartment, she found a small brown envelope tucked into her mailbox. No return address, no note. Inside, the hallway photo, the one Sienna had found, now cut in half. Only her side remained. The morning after receiving the half-cut photo, Ivy stared at it on her kitchen table as the kettle began to whistle. The image, only her side, smiling softly, young and full of belief, felt like a cruel edit. Whoever had done it hadn't just cut paper. They'd tried to cut history. And something about that lit a quiet fire inside her. Ivy was done being polite about people rewriting her. At work, the mood was brittle. People pretended not to look at her, which was somehow worse than being stared at. Her reassignment had officially become company gossip. It wasn't in the memos, but it was in the way people paused mid-conversation when she walked past. The way no one sat beside her in the staff cafe. The way someone had unfollowed her on the company social app. But that morning, something shifted. As she stepped into the elevator, two other women followed behind her, Anna from legal and Rosalind from marketing. They'd always been cordial but distant. Polite waves, a shared nod in meetings. This time, they spoke. "Hey, Ivy," Anna said, pressing her floor. Oh, saw what happened? Rosalind leaned in slightly. Brielle's pulled stunts like this before. You're just the first person she can't intimidate. Ivy blinked. Why are you telling me this now? Anna exchanged a glance with Rosalind. Then Rosalind said quietly, because someone should have said something sooner. And just like that, Ivy didn't feel entirely alone in the building anymore. She returned to her cubicle to find a mug sitting on her desk. It was bright yellow, hand-painted, a small, awkward sunflower design clearly done by a child. Inside, a folded note in shaky crayon. You're my favorite person who isn't my dad. Love, Sienna. Underneath the mug, a cookie, wrapped in cling film and smashed on one side. Ivy laughed, out loud, for the first time in weeks. At noon she was summoned, not by HR, not by Brielle, but by Damien, a simple message. Executive conference room, 12:30 p.m. Please come. Ivy walked in expecting tension. Maybe even more confrontation. But instead she found Damien standing at the head of the room with several department heads and senior staff seated around the table. No Brielle. The room went quiet when Ivy entered. Damien gestured to the seat beside him. Ms. Caldwell, thank you for coming. She hesitated, but sat. He cleared his throat. I asked everyone here because I want full transparency. A concern was raised regarding professional boundaries and reputational risk. But after reviewing the timeline, the HR findings, and some recent actions taken without proper oversight, he glanced briefly toward the empty chair at the end of the table, I've concluded that the concern was less about professionalism and more about control. Murmurs around the room. Ivy Caldwell has been an employee here for nearly a decade. She's never asked for favors. She's never abused access. What she has done is show more loyalty to this company than most of us could claim. Someone clapped. One, then another followed. I take full responsibility for past history that I never made public, Damien added. And I regret the way I handled it years ago, but I will not allow this company to use her silence against her. He turned to her, and I would like to ask, if she is willing, that Ivy Caldwell return to her previous position. Gasps, then a stunned hush. All eyes on her. Ivy stood slowly, hands resting calmly on the back of the chair. I appreciate the gesture, but I think it's important that I speak for myself now. She faced the room. I have worked quietly because I believed my work should speak for me, but lately silence has become something else. A permission slip for others to invent their own stories. She reached into her purse and unfolded the torn photo. I kept this for years because it reminded me of something real. Not because I was trying to use it, but because it was part of me, a part I was never allowed to speak about. The room was still. I will return, she said finally, if the culture of this place changes, not just for me, but for everyone who's been made small so someone else could stay big. More applause this time. Louder, from people who'd never spoken to her before. Damien smiled softly, not as a CEO, as a man seeing her finally stand tall. Later that day, Brielle returned from her off-site meeting to find her keycard access to the executive suite temporarily suspended. Officially, it was system maintenance. Unofficially, her reign was cracking. That evening, Ivy walked into her apartment and set her purse down, lighter than it had felt in weeks. She made tea, opened her window, let in the cool autumn breeze. Her phone buzzed. Damien. Dinner? Not as an apology, just as two people who never finished something. She stared at the message, then typed back, Ivy, only if there's real soup this time? No boxes. His reply came seconds later. Damien, deal, and dessert? As she sipped her tea, Ivy glanced again at the photo on her counter, the one that had been torn. But now there was something beside it. The other half, taped back together. Neatly, precisely. A new note beneath it, handwritten. Some things are worth restoring, even if it takes time. DQ. Ivy stood outside the bistro longer than she should have, one hand resting lightly on her purse, the other fidgeting with the silver leaf pendant around her neck. The street was quiet, kissed by the glow of golden lamplight and the gentle warmth of early evening. From inside, she could see the soft flicker of candles on wooden tables, couples laughing over wine, waiters gliding between chairs with ease. She had imagined this night before, years ago, when she still believed in someday. But the version she'd imagined always ended with her being the secret. A hand held under the table, a goodbye in the shadows. Tonight was different. Tonight she was expected. She stepped in. The host greeted her with a knowing smile. Mr. Quinn is already seated, he said gently. Right this way. Damien stood as she approached, his tall frame silhouetted against the soft amber glow of the window beside him. No suit, just a simple charcoal sweater, dark jeans, and a vulnerability she hadn't seen on him in years. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't lean in for a kiss. He simply pulled out her chair. You came, he said quietly. I almost didn't, she replied, smoothing the fabric of her navy-wrap dress as she sat. He nodded. I wouldn't have blamed you. She looked around. You picked a place with windows. Intentionally? A small smile tugged at her lips. Trying to prove I'm not a secret? No, he said gently. Trying to prove I'm not ashamed. A waiter arrived with a basket of bread, a small plate of olives, and menus they barely looked at. I already ordered your favorite soup, Damien said, glancing at her. Roasted squash with thyme. Still your favorite? She raised an eyebrow. If you'd gotten it wrong, I might have walked out. He grinned, just enough to soften the moment. I didn't dare risk it. They ate slowly, talked cautiously. The conversation began with neutral ground, the company, Sienna, books they hadn't finished reading. But as the soup bowls emptied and the main course arrived, grilled fish for her, fresh pasta primavera for him, the old questions returned like ghosts at the table. I want to ask you something, she said. Setting her fork down, he looked up. Anything? When it ended, back then, why didn't you speak up? Damien wiped his mouth with his napkin, then exhaled. Because I was trying to protect my future. I thought if I kept things clean, quiet, professional, I could rise without friction. And did you? I rose, he said. But not without friction, and not without regret. She tilted her head. And me? You were the friction I didn't deserve. The good kind. The kind that made me better. Her expression didn't soften, not yet. You know, she said, after a pause, it wasn't the end that hurt the most. It was what came after. The silence, the way people looked at me like I was pathetic for believing I mattered to you. You did, he said quickly, more than I let myself admit. But I had to carry that in secret for years. Damien looked down. I'm sorry, Ivy. For every day you carried what I was too cowardly to face." Her eyes watered, but she blinked them dry. "You're not the only one who was afraid," she whispered. "I stayed in that job, day after day, hoping no one would remember we ever existed. And part of me hated myself for still loving you through it." That landed between them like a breath neither of them could take. "But now," she continued, voice steadier, "I love myself more than I fear you." He looked at her with something deeper than affection, admiration. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I didn't do it to make you proud," she replied. "I did it so I could finally sleep at night." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the words settle like dust. Then Damien picked up his wine and raised it slightly. "To sleeping better." She clinked her glass gently against his, "to waking up stronger." Dessert was a shared slice of chocolate torte with 2 forks. "I thought you hated sharing desserts," Ivy teased. "I hate sharing bad desserts," he replied. "This one's worth the risk." They each took a bite. The silence turned softer, lighter. "You know what I remember the most?" she asked, setting her fork down. "From when we were us." He looked up. "Tell me." "That night in your apartment, you tried to fold my laundry. You did it all wrong," he chuckled. "I still do." "You tried anyway," she said, "Moa. That mattered." Damien smiled, the kind of smile you give when you're seeing someone fully, maybe for the first time. "I'd fold your laundry again," he said. "Even wrong. I'd let you, maybe." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a yes?" She smirked. "It's a don't push your luck." They walked out under string lights stretched across the street. The air was crisp. She pulled her coat tighter. He offered his scarf. She refused, but appreciated the gesture. They passed a bookstore with a window display, a stack of novels beneath a hand-painted sign that read, "It's never too late to begin again." They stopped. "Is that too on the nose?" he asked. Ivy smiled faintly. "Only if it comes easy." Damien turned to her. "Nothing about you is easy, but everything about you is worth it." She said nothing. He didn't press. When they reached her building, he stopped on the corner. "I don't want to walk away from this, not again." "Then don't," she said quietly. "But walk slower this time," he nodded. "I can do that." When Ivy reached her door, she found a small box waiting. Brown, unmarked, no note on the outside. She brought it in, opened it carefully. Inside, a folded shirt, sloppily done, familiar. And, resting on top, a small handwritten note. "I'm still bad at this, but I'll keep trying. One shirt at a time. D." She smiled, not because he'd changed, but because she had. And now, the love she might be ready for was one that walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, and never again in secret. The next morning, Ivy watered her windowsill herbs, the folded shirt still sitting on her kitchen counter, like a peace offering she hadn't quite accepted. Sunlight streamed through the glass, landing softly on the silver leaf pendant around her neck. She touched it gently, then let her fingers fall away. Her phone buzzed. "From Harriet Baines Coffee today. I'm in town. I need to see you." 11 a.m. My treat. And yes, I know you hate surprises. H. Ivy froze. Harriet Baines, former mentor, one-time boss. The kind of woman who wore quiet power like a silk scarf, and once told Ivy, never confuse being overlooked with being unworthy. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since Harriet left Quinn International after a high-level fallout with the board, a fallout Ivy always suspected had something to do with Damien. At exactly 11:02, Ivy walked into the cafe, the bell chiming overhead. Harriet was already seated by the window, in a dove-gray blazer and soft gold earrings, sipping from a delicate porcelain cup like she owned the building. "Ivy Caldwell," she said, rising to embrace her, still carrying the weight of the world with beautiful posture. "I see," Ivy smiled. "Some habits are hard to break." They sat. A waitress brought Ivy her usual without asking, green tea, honey on the side. She took a slow sip before speaking. "I assume this isn't just a social visit?" Harriet raised an eyebrow. "Is it so hard to believe I might miss your face?" "Yes," Ivy said simply. Harriet chuckled. "Fair." She reached into her handbag and placed a folder on the table. "I'm building something new," she said. "A firm of my own. Small team. High trust. Clean values. And I need someone I can count on to manage operations while I handle the front lines." Ivy didn't touch the folder. "I have a job," she said. "You have a trap," Harriet replied. "Don't confuse stability with safety." Ivy's jaw tensed. "It's not the same place it was. Things are changing." "Because he asked you to dinner?" That landed like a crack in the air. "I didn't come here to be warned off, Damien," Ivy said. "That part of my life is mine to manage." "I'm not warning you," Harriet said calmly. "I'm offering you a choice." Ivy looked at the folder. The top page bore the words, "Deputy Director of Operations, a higher title, a better salary, no shadows." Harriet leaned in. "You wouldn't be someone's whisper. You'd be the voice." Later, back at her desk, yes, her old desk, reinstated just days ago, Ivy stared at her screen, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The folder was tucked into her bag. She hadn't even opened it. "New job offer?" came a voice behind her. "Damien?" She didn't turn right away. "How'd you know?" "I saw Harriet's name on your calendar, and I know her well enough to guess." Now she turned slowly. "So, are you going to tell me not to take it?" He shook his head. "No, I'm going to tell you you'd be brilliant at it." That caught her off guard. "But I'd be lying," he added, "if I said I didn't hope you'd stay." Ivy studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I want to see who you become," he said. "Here." Without hiding, without being asked to shrink, he paused. "But if that can't happen under my roof, then go, and don't look back." She stared at him, heart caught in her throat. "Are you saying you'd let me go again?" "I'm saying," Damien said gently, "I'm not going to hold you back to keep you close." That evening, Ivy sat with Miriam on her balcony, sipping tea and watching the sky shift to lavender. "So let me get this straight," Miriam said, setting her mug down. "You've got your old job back, a man trying to right his wrongs, and a new job offer that doesn't come with corporate snakes hiding in the vents? Basically." Miriam leaned back in her chair. "Well, you're either at the start of a bold new chapter or a very elegant midlife crisis." Ivy laughed, really laughed. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "Damien's trying, and when he's like this, it's hard not to remember why I fell for him. And the job, it would be mine. No history, no rumors. Just clean ground." Miriam nodded. "So the question isn't what you're walking toward. It's what you're willing to walk away from." Ivy looked down at the folded shirt in her lap and said quietly, "Maybe I'm finally ready to choose myself." The next morning, Ivy walked into the executive floor. Brielle was at her desk, flipping through files with the confidence of someone who thought the dust had settled. Ivy paused in front of her. "I'm resigning," she said calmly. Brielle looked up, surprised. "Really? I thought you'd cling to that desk until they pried you off it." Ivy smiled. "Oh, I'm not leaving because of you. I'm leaving because I remembered what it feels like to be chosen, for my voice, not just my silence." She dropped a sealed envelope on the desk. "My formal resignation, effective next week." As Ivy walked away, Damien stepped out of his office just in time to see her go. But instead of calling after her, he let her walk. Because this time, she wasn't walking away from him. She was walking toward herself. Ivy's new office didn't have floor-to-ceiling windows. It didn't overlook the skyline or smell like fresh leather and ambition. But it had something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The first morning at Harriet's firm began with a handwritten welcome note on her desk, a modest bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar, and a cherrywood tray holding a warm cup of tea, green with honey on the side. No politics, no whispers, no walking on eggshells. Here, her voice didn't echo, it landed. She took a breath as she arranged a photo frame on her new desk, not the old photo of her and Damien. That one had been tucked away in a drawer. This photo was of her parents' garden, the place she'd grown up learning that love and growth needed the same thing, patience and light. "Ivy?" She looked up. Harriet stood at the door with her usual grace, holding a folder. "I just wanted to say, you belong here, you. And I'm not talking about the title. I'm talking about the room." Ivy nodded, heart swelling slightly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "Oh, I know," Harriet said, smiling softly. "We women always know what it costs to be heard." That week, Damien didn't text. He didn't call. He didn't show up. And that was the part Ivy hadn't expected. She had thought he'd fight harder, that he'd send flowers or emails or some desperate, dramatic gesture, but he didn't. He gave her space. And strangely, that absence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like respect. On Friday afternoon, Ivy was reviewing team schedules when a familiar voice chirped from outside her office door. "Ms. Ivy?" She looked up, and there was Sienna, standing sheepishly beside Harriet, holding a small paper bag and a giant glittery sticker book under her arm. "I didn't tell her where you worked," Harriet said gently, "but she showed up to my office with a question and a cinnamon bun. I didn't stand a chance." Ivy walked out, crouching down to Sienna's height. "You came to see me?" The little girl nodded, shy now. "I brought something." She handed Ivy the paper bag. Inside, a folded origami crane, another lopsided cookie, and a note written in pink crayon. "Daddy misses you, but he said you have wings, so I made you this. In case you ever want to fly back." Sienna Ivy's throat tightened. Harriet placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'll give you 2 a minute." When they were alone, Ivy asked softly, "Is he okay?" Sienna shrugged. "He's quiet, but not sad. Just waiting. He said that's what love does when it grows up." "It waits." Ivy smiled through a swell of emotion. "You're a very wise 6-year-old. "I'm 6 3/4, Sienna corrected. They both laughed, and Ivy, without thinking, pulled her close. That evening, Ivy found herself walking, not aimlessly, but not with full intent either. Her feet knew the way, even if her heart hadn't caught up. Damien's townhouse looked the same, but tonight it felt different. She stood at the gate for a long moment, unsure if this was the right time or the right step. Then the door opened. He hadn't seen her yet. He was outside, adjusting the porch light. A quiet, normal moment. When he looked up, his expression didn't shift in surprise. Just warmth. Like he'd hoped for this, but hadn't expected it. "Ivy." She stepped forward slowly. "I got your message," she said. "I didn't send one." She held up the origami crane. "She did it for you." He smiled. "She's good at knowing when to do things I'm not brave enough to." They stood in silence. "I'm not here for a grand scene," Ivy said. "Good," he replied. "I'm out of speeches." She looked around. "How have you been?" "Grateful. Tired. Learning how to fold laundry without supervision." She laughed quietly. "I didn't call," he added, "because I didn't want to make your choice about me. I noticed. I wanted to give you space." "For once?" She nodded. "You did. And now you're here." "I am." He stepped down the porch steps toward her slowly. "Why?" "Because I miss the way you tried, even when you failed. I miss the version of you who wasn't perfect, but who showed up." He stopped in front of her. "I'm still him, just less afraid now." She studied his face. The suit and boardroom armor were gone, just a man in a sweatshirt, eyes full of truth. "I'm not asking to rewrite the past," Damien said. "I just want to live better in the next chapter." Ivy took a deep breath, then reached into her purse and handed him the old photograph, the one they'd once been in together, still mended with tape. "But only if we add to it," she said. "No more ghosts, no more silence." He nodded. "No more secrets." She smiled gently. Also, I'm still not folding your shirts." He grinned. "Fair?" Inside, Sienna peeked through the curtain and squealed, "They're smiling!" Then she turned to her doll and whispered, "I told you they'd fix it." The table was too small for a dinner this meaningful. It wobbled slightly, just enough to remind Ivy that perfection wasn't the point. And maybe that was the quiet message tucked into the evening already, that healing didn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it just sat at a slightly uneven table, beside roasted chicken and a child with glitter on her fingers. Damien had cooked. Really cooked. No takeout, no last-minute delivery in fancy packaging. The kitchen had clearly been through a storm, herbs on the counter, a half-peeled carrot abandoned in the sink, but the result was unmistakably made by hand. There were golden potatoes, buttered carrots, and roasted chicken that filled the house with rosemary and garlic. "I helped with the salad," Sienna announced as she climbed onto her seat, a little high for her legs to swing freely. "I washed the lettuce 5 times. "5?" Ivy asked, hiding a smile. "Because Daddy said once isn't enough, and then I forgot how many times I did it, so I just kept going." Ivy grinned. "Well, I can already tell this will be the cleanest lettuce I've ever eaten." They ate slowly, the way people do when something unsaid is sitting just beneath the table. The food helped. Food? So did Sienna, who narrated her day with a kind of bright chaos only 6-year-olds can manage, jumping from school to a dream she had about a frog wearing glasses, then back to why peas were suspicious. Ivy listened, and she watched. She noticed the way Damien looked at his daughter, not just with affection, but with pride, with humility. The kind of look a man wears when he's realized too late what's really important, and is doing the work to deserve it back. And she noticed, too, the way he looked at her, not like someone trying to fix the past, but like someone trying to earn a future. After dinner, after. Sienna insisted on bringing out dessert. She disappeared into the kitchen with a dramatic "don't come in" and returned 5 minutes later with 3 teacups, each filled with 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream and crushed graham crackers on top. "I invented it," she said proudly. "It's called Sienna Surprise." Ivy took a bite. "It's oddly comforting." "That's what I was going for." Damien raised his eyebrows. "I thought you were going for don't melt all over the floor." Sienna rolled her eyes and muttered, "Parents." Once the dishes were cleared and Sienna had settled with her sticker book on the couch, Ivy and Damien found themselves in the kitchen. Side by side at the sink. He washed, she dried. No discussion, no need for instructions. They slipped into a rhythm that surprised them both. "Feels familiar," she said, drying a glass. "You always dried faster than I washed," he replied. "You always left soap on the forks." "I still do." She looked at him, half smiling. "You're not going to offer to fold laundry next, are you?" He smirked. "I thought about it, but I remember how that turned out." They shared a laugh, and it wasn't tinged with old wounds or sharp edges. It was clean, soft, new. When the last plate was stacked, Ivy turned to face him fully. "I told my mother about you last week," she said. Damien's expression shifted, surprise, then caution. "Really?" "She asked if you were still a runner." He exhaled. "And what did you say?" "I said I didn't know yet, but if you showed up for dinner like a gentleman, I'd consider giving you another chance." And Ivy picked up a clean spoon and slid it into the drawer. "Well, you did show up, and the chicken wasn't bad." He tilted his head. "So that's a yes?" "It's a maybe, with potential." His voice lowered. "I can live with that." Later, in the living room, Sienna curled up beside Ivy on the couch. Her head rested against Ivy's arm, her doll tucked under the blanket. Tiny breaths, deep and even. Damien returned with a cup of tea for Ivy, green, with honey on the side. No words. He just handed it to her and sat down across from them, watching. "She reminds me of you," Ivy said softly, brushing a curl from Sienna's forehead. "That quiet curiosity, that way of noticing everything." She asks questions I still don't know how to answer. You've done a good job. Damien hesitated, then said she asked if love disappears when someone leaves. Ivy looked up. What did you tell her? That sometimes it fades, but if it was real, it finds a new way to exist, even if it's different. Ivy nodded slowly. And do you believe that? She asked. I do now. He reached across the coffee table, slowly and gently took her hand. He didn't squeeze, didn't rush, just held it. I know I don't get to ask for things, not after everything. But if I could, she looked at him. Go on. I'd ask to stay near, however you'll let me. She was quiet. Then she turned her palm, allowing his fingers to weave with hers. You're already near, she said. An hour later, as the evening deepened and quiet settled in, Ivy stood at the door, her coat buttoned halfway, scarf draped loosely around her neck. Damien walked her out. The porch light cast a soft circle of gold around them. Same time next week? He asked, hands in his pockets. Maybe, she said. Eyes gentle. If you promise not to overcook the chicken, I'll practice. He leaned forward, slowly, respectfully, and kissed her forehead. No tension, no fire. Just care, the kind that stayed. As she stepped onto the walkway, a breeze caught her scarf and Ivy turned to catch it, only to notice something near the garden. A single white daisy, blooming beside the porch steps, tall and simple. Next to it a small wooden sign, weathered but clearly carved, Ivy, just her name. No declarations, no demands, just a space held, just a promise. She smiled not because she was certain of the future, but because for the first time in a long time, she was certain of herself. 2 weeks later, Ivy sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, a pair of reading glasses perched low on her nose, and a cardboard box in front of her, the last one. She'd cleaned out the drawer, the one that had quietly held a decade of what-ifs, closed chapters, and folded memories, the necklace box she never opened, a napkin with his handwriting, the photo, repaired and whole but no longer haunting. She didn't need the drawer anymore. She had space now, in her home, her heart, her life. It wasn't that she'd let the past go, it's that she'd finally let herself in. That afternoon, Ivy visited the park near her new office, the one with the little iron benches and wild daffodils no one ever trimmed. She sat with a sandwich and a journal. No rush, no roles to play. Her phone buzzed once. Damien. Sienna has her class photo today. She asked if you could be the one to braid her hair. Ivy smiled, tapping a reply. Tell her I'll bring the sparkly pins. The schoolyard buzzed with that particular chaos only elementary schools could manage. Children in tiny uniforms zigzagged through puddles of sun and shade. A teacher clapped rhythmically to herd them into a line. Sienna stood by a tree, holding 2 pink clips and a serious expression. I've been thinking, she said as Ivy crouched to begin braiding her hair, you and Daddy should take a picture together. A picture? Ivy asked, parting the strands. Yes, one that's now, not from the old times. Because you both look better now. Ivy paused mid-braid. Do we? Yep, you're shinier. That made Ivy laugh. Well, thank you. Sienna reached up and touched the silver leaf pendant. You always wear this, even before. It's special to me. Was it Daddy's? It was a gift, Ivy said, from someone I loved. And now, it reminds me of who I became after. Sienna nodded. I think you should keep it forever. After the photo was taken, classroom chaos and all, Ivy stood with Damien by the school gates, neither of them in a rush to leave. She asked me last week if we were a family, he said. What did you say? I said families don't all look the same, but they always know how to come back to each other. Ivy smiled. That's a better answer than most adults can manage. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. No pressure, he said. But I was thinking, if we ever take that picture Sienna wants, maybe it could go here. She opened the envelope. Inside, a new photo frame. Empty, glass clean, simple wooden edge, nothing fancy. But carved into the back, in small handwriting, were the words, "For the woman who taught me what real love sounds like when it speaks softly." That evening, after Sienna had dozed off on the couch, Ivy and Damien sat on the floor, barefoot, leaning back against the sofa like they used to, a glass of wine in each hand, the house quiet, warm. Damien stood up and left the room for a moment. When he returned, he held a small wooden box, not velvet, not new, just honest. Inside there was no ring, only a folded piece of paper. He offered it to her without a word. Ivy opened it. "You already have my daughter calling you home. You already have my respect, my listening, and my peace. But if it makes sense to you, I'd like to call you my wife, too." Ivy went still. Damien said nothing. She folded the paper carefully, met his eyes, and said, "I don't need a ring to feel chosen, and I don't need a ceremony to love you truthfully, but if that's what you're asking for, then yes." Damien lowered his eyes, almost unsure how to receive a yes like that, calm, certain, without noise. Ivy stepped closer and added, "But hear this. I'm not saying yes to the man who once left. I'm saying yes to the one who stayed." With the lights on. 3 months later, late autumn, family gathering at Damien's home. The table was bigger now, not grand, just extended. 2 smaller tables pushed together, a patchwork of tablecloths and mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbors. Damien carved the turkey. Ivy poured tea. Sienna placed hand-written name cards beside every plate, complete with doodles. Marla from reception brought an apple pie. Miriam brought her opinion on everything. Even Harriet stopped by with her signature lavender scones and a rare compliment for Damien's mashed potatoes. There was no toast, no speech, just laughter, small stories, and second helpings. At one point, Ivy stepped away into the hallway for a moment of breath. There, hanging quietly above the console table, was a new photo, her and Damien. Outside in the garden, she was holding a daisy. He was laughing. And they weren't posing. They were just being. Sienna found her there. "We look like a movie in that picture." Ivy smiled. "I think we look like people who finally got it right." "You're not going away again, are you?" "No," Ivy said softly. "But I needed to leave, so I could come back as someone who doesn't disappear." Sienna nodded, content. Then, "Come on, the pie's being served, and Daddy forgot the whipped cream, and I told him that was a crime." Ivy laughed and followed her back to the table. Back at Ivy's apartment late that night, the tea kettle whistled. Ivy poured a cup, slipped off her shoes, and looked at the quiet frame on the wall, the one Damien had given her. It no longer sat empty. Now it held the photo from the hallway, her, a daisy, a smile, no shadows. Next to it, she'd added a small note. Handwritten in her own neat cursive, "Chosen, not hidden, loved with the lights on." She sat back, cradling her mug, her heart full but not heavy. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a beginning, the kind written not in grand gestures, but in quiet choices, humble dinners, and a love that stopped asking her to shrink. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stay. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away first. And sometimes, if the love is real and the timing finally right, you come back not to finish the story, but to write a brand new one, the end. And now it's your turn. What would you have done in Ivy's shoes? Would you have stayed, left for good, or waited for someone to love you out loud? If Ivy's story touched you, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and rate this story from 0 to 10. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.